My name is Elisha Leonard Kabuta from Tanzania. Also, I am a veterinary student at Sokoine University of Agriculture. Also, I am a civil servant as a livestock and the fisheries officer. I do treating animals, doing meat inspection, and giving farmers advices on how they can keep their livestock well. So today I'm here to present measuring prevalence of contaminated meat to guide food safety policy in Tanzania. Can you go? Yes. So this is a table of content. As you can see, abstract, introduction, objective, literature review, methodology, result, recommendation, and reference. Yes. So meat contamination by pathogenic organism poses a major public health challenge in Tanzania. And this report synthesized evidence on the prevalence of microbial contamination in meat, focusing in Escherichia coli salmonella species. Yes. Data from cross-section studies conducted in Mbeya region in Tanzania, there is where I work, indicate high contamination level and the widespread antimicrobial resistance. As you know, the issue of AMR now is becoming big. We are eating meat that is contaminated with drug residuals, and this study will help us to know how to do the recommendation to the government so as we can change the policy. This finding highlights systemic weakness in meat handling, slaughter hygiene, control use of antibiotic, and the regulatory enforcement. The studies underscore the need for evidence-based food safety policy, enhanced surveillance, and a One Health approach. When we're talking about One Health approach, I think we know, all of us, that is animal sector, human sector, and environment sectors are interlinked together so as to make these public health issues to be of great deal. So as you can see the pictures there, these are slaughter slabs, slaughter slab, and some other places like here, it is this the way where the disposal place, the environment are not good at all. You can see it is easy to contaminate the meat. This is where the meat are coming from. Cattle are slaughtered here. As you can see, the cattle there, and the environment is not good at all. People are going to eat that meat, but we have to change the policy so as to protect the public. You can see here there is water lodging, and that place is cleaned so that can create the environment for bacteria to grow. Go forward. So meat is an essential source of protein for the Tanzanian population. However, the unsafe meat remain a major contributor to food-borne illness. As we know, there are many diseases that can be caused by the food that we eat. The foods which are contaminated can cause a lot of problems in our bodies. Poor hygiene during slaughter, transportation, and retailing increase the risk of contamination with pathogenic bacteria. Yes. So measuring the prevalence of contaminated meat is critical for informing national food policy, food safety policy. Within Tanzania, beef is the most consumed meat, yet poor sanitary and handling condition. Of course, we have fish meat. Of course, we have poultry meat, but beef meat from livestock is the most consumed, but yet poor sanitary and handling condition. Yes. So the importance of doing this study, the finding will help us to improve meat inspection, hygiene practice, and the consumers' protection. Easy to identify weak point in the meat value chain, so it can help us to make recommendation and to correct where there is weakness. Also, this study has taken in Mbeya region, and Mbeya is among of the major livestock production and the meat supply, but it lack reliable data concerning contamination of meat. So this will help to cover that gap. Also, there is limited and outdated data on the prevalence of contaminated meat in Tanzania. Objective. This study, the main objective is to measure the prevalence of contaminated meat in Tanzania, so as to guide the food and the health sectors to make other policies. But also there are other objectives to determine contaminants like bacteria, viruses, also drug residues on meat, also to assess hygiene in the abattoirs, slaughter slab, also in where the meats are handled or transported. Also to know the potential risk factors that can happen there. Also, this study will give us the evidence for recommendation. Yes, go on. So different studies in Tanzania have reported significant contamination of meat with pathogenic bacteria. Yes. So these are the studies. As you see, Nonga identify Campylobacter species in beef carcasses. Mgaya found Campylobacter in broiler chicken meat in Dodoma. Mdegela reported a high prevalence of multi-drug resistance Escherichia coli in poultry meat in Dar es Salaam. So this study used a systematic review of cross-section studies conducted in Tanzania between that year 2024 up to 25, specifically in Mbeya region. So in Mbeya, 50 slaughter slabs were observed, and study population consisted of raw meat samples from cattle, goat, and sheep. So this is a map of Mbeya. As you can see, there are several districts: Chunya, Mbarali, Mbeya DC, Rungwe, Kyela, and the other places. Data collection. Sampling. We did a purposive sampling to collect various samples, including raw meat and the surface swab from abattoirs equipment. Also, questionnaire and interviews. Questionnaire and interview are done to gather information on the knowledge, attitude of the food to different people, the transporters, the meat handlers, the other meat inspectors. Yes. Also, observation was done to assess the infrastructure condition and the actual hygiene of the facilities. So Data were collected in these three ways: sampling, survey, and observation. So that is sample size determination. As you can see, N required sample size, Z standard normal deviation, P estimated prevalence of meat contamination, and D is margin of error, that is 5%. Yes. So because we are dealing with bacteria, we have to go to laboratory to analyze some issues there. So bacteriological examination sample were taken to the laboratory for analysis to determine the level of specific bacteria contaminant. Total viable count was done using plate count agar, Escherichia coli using myconkin agar, Salmonella species. Selective medium or selective enrichment was used. Campylobacter nutrient agar, that is Bolton growth, was used. After that incubation, plates were incubated at that temperature, but temperature varies with bacteria, as you know that. Then after the bacteria grow, colony counting and identification was done. So antimicrobial susceptibility test was done to test the presence of antibiotic in the meat. And the drugs that were tested was ampicillin, tetracycline, gentamicin, erythromycin, sulfomethazole. Zone of inhibition were measured in millimeters. Results were interpreted as sensitive, intermediate, or resistance. Go ahead. So a total of 50 raw meat samples were analyzed from slaughter slab and butcheries. 85% were positive for at least one bacteria isolate. Escherichia coli, 45 isolates. Salmonella, 15 isolates. Staphylococcus, 25 isolates. Data analysis. Microbial count were log transferred to normalized data. Descriptive statistics were calculated, that is mean, standard deviation, prevalence, percentage. Also, we compared contamination by using chi-square tests. SPSS version 26 was used to perform that analysis. And that is the result. So as you can see there, there is safety threshold 5.0, 2.0, 2.0, 2.0. But at the meat, no, there, but at the meat there, you can see then there is increase in numbers coliform units. So there is high contamination, high coliform load, high bacterial contamination, and poor surface hygiene. Go ahead. So surface threshold level are typical international limits. They may differ in local guidance, but are useful for risk interpretation. Meat contamination, there is a high level of total viable count, total colony count, and the total fecal count. In beef exceeds safe limit. So that number exceeded the safe limit or the safe threshold level that was put by the international standard. This result indicates poor hygiene and potential pathogenic presence. Hygiene practice, like lack of protective equipment, poor water access and inadequate handling. During observation, we can see the meat handlers don't wash hands, don't use special equipment to handle the meat. Even the truck that is used to transport the meat, they are not well washed. They are dirty. That is why we can see the hygiene practice is poor. Recommendation. Due to this study, it is good for the government to improve slaughter slab and the market infrastructures like where people meet, where the slaughtering take place, including clean water and the waste management. As you saw those pictures before there, some there was no good drainage system that can lead to water lodging and it can cause to bacteria to grow. Also, the government should provide regular training on hygiene and food safety to meat handlers and inspectors. Sometimes the animals may be good, but due to the slaughtering environment, we can contaminate the meat and cause problems to the public. Also, because meat is a perishable product, the government should promote cold chain system for meat storage and transportation so as to avoid the leakage and destruction of the product. Also, the government should establish regular national surveillance program on meat contamination. And last one, the government should control the use of antimicrobial on livestock. This will help to avoid antimicrobial resistance to animals, also to people who use that product. Because you use the same drugs, tetracycline, amoxicillin, when you eat that meat that contain that drugs, it causes antimicrobial resistance to us because it enters into our body in low quantity. Thank you very much. That is the end.
Thank you so much, Elisha. That was great. We'll open up to questions now if anyone else has questions. I can start with the question. So with your research, you found that there's high prevalence of contamination in meat, high prevalence of AMR resistance or AMR. Have you been speaking with anyone to try to develop policies to change that? You have a bunch of recommendations that are practical policy recommendations. Have you been doing anything to kind of try to further that, or do you have plans to?
Yes. Of course, I have communicated once with the Minister of Livestock and Fisheries in our country, and I told him about this, the problem of meat contamination, and he said that they are working on it. But the issue is this, there is a lack of meat inspectors in our countries. Yes, especially developing countries. So it is good also for them to hire more meat inspectors and improve the equipment and the personnel so as they can inspect meat in a good way. So I'm trying to improve myself on this, and I'll try to find and look more opportunities so as I can take these studies to the policymakers, to the people's representatives, ministers, so as they can change the policy so as to protect the community at large. But I once talked with him, not in such big, but in a small way. But I think as days go on, we'll do that. Yes.
That's great. It's great to hear that you're working on it and that it sounds like there's already a knowledge of this already in Tanzania and that people are going to try to work on this moving forward as well.
So, Elisha, I'm very curious about vendor awareness. The butchers and the sellers, to what degree do you think they are aware and understand and might distinguish between what they eat themselves in contrast to what they sell? Do you think people who are the vendors and the butchers are aware of this, and so they would not eat what they sell because they know there's a problem?
Thank you for that good question. Of course, some of them, they know that what they are doing is not good. But because it is a business, people are after money. So they are doing that. Sometimes they know that this cattle came from treatment, but no healing. So they are slaughtering it and sell the meat to the community, but they don't take it. Why? Because they need money. So that's why we need law enforcement to take its part on this area, because we can kill people by doing this. So, by your question, it is true, some of them know, and some of them, they don't know. So that is why we are trying to educate the society on how to protect themselves from contaminated meat, and also to make other policies and enforce and send those who are doing bad things to the legal procedures. Yes.
Very interesting to try to ask and find out whether people don't eat but do sell, because that's very clear evidence that something is controllable because they see it, they know it.
Yes.
In contrast to something that they would be the victims also. A next question is, you've been in dialogue with the Ministry of Agriculture,
Yes.
but who regulates the marketplace? Who is in charge of the vending at that location? Do you know anything about the governance of the market, of the marketplace,
Yes.
of the physical place where people are butchering and selling?
Yes. Of course, in market where the meat is sold, it is controlled and guided by local authorities, the local authorities. And the district veterinary officer also involved there, district veterinary officer, district livestock officer also involved there. So it is up to us now also to change ourselves, because us veterinarians and us we livestock officers, we have to do our part in making sure that everything is controlled in the market. Yeah. So in general, local leaders are the ones that are monitoring the marketplace.
Yes, it's a very interesting policy problem because it's not the Ministry of Agriculture that's responsible for food safety.
Yeah.
In most countries, it comes down to city government and city government ability to enforce sometimes a national, sometimes regional, state level, and sometimes local ordinances, local regulations.
Yeah, that's true. Also, the issue of hiring more meat inspectors is important. Yeah, because we local government depend on ministry to get more meat inspectors.
And I don't want to ask, all the questions, but it is important to go on to the question of consumer behavior and cooking. Alex, you were about to ask that?
Yeah, I was just thinking the next logical question is, do you think people who are at the market buying this meat, do they know that there could be problems with the meat not being safe? Are there places people go to buy more expensive meat because they know it's prepared more safely? And then are people thinking about this in how they cook the food? They frying it at high temperatures? What do they do in their own kitchen to make sure that it's safe? I'm curious what you think about those things.
Yeah, of course that is true, and I can recommend this. Sometimes people can take the raw meat and they take them to home to cook, but due to lack of understanding, the meat is undercooked, and the bacteria, viruses, and the other contaminants are not destroyed well. But also, there are these coliform bacteria difficult to be destroyed by heat. Do you know that? Yeah. So I don't think that only cooking is good, but we have to protect and having good environment there where the meat is processed so as to avoid contamination. So your point is good. Your point is good, but also we have to do the issue of preventing contamination at the slaughter slab, abattoir, and how it's transported. Maybe you can help me, sir. Does cooking affect drug residue in the meat?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you would know better than anyone on the call, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. To some extent, it can't destroy the drug residue. Yeah. So if we take that drug, it can cause antimicrobial resistance in our body also. Yes.
It is a really interesting and important point that in nutrition research, we don't usually learn very much about food safety. We don't usually learn very much about food science. That's taught separately in a different part of the university. We don't learn much about microbiology. Instead, we just learn about biochemistry. So we don't actually know much about the microbiome, and we're discovering it quite late in the history of nutrition.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That is why we need one health approach. Yeah. The environment, human sectors, veterinarians, and agriculture interlink so as to make one idea. Yeah.
It looks like we have a question as well. Fiobora, if you want to just unmute yourself and ask your question, or if you're unable to, you can type it in the chat as well.
Come again?
I think we just have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Elisha. This is such a nice presentation. I have around 2 questions on it. The first question, it's about the level of contamination that's from the results that you presented. Does it raise a public health concern based on the results that you just showed us? And another question, I'm also in Tanzania, and I had people saying about the issue of house flies in butchers, that for butchers that do not have house flies, they are using chemicals that are not good for our health. And house flies also cause the contamination part. So can you provide more explanation on this, and if this perception can also be the reason for high contamination? Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. Also, the issue of results. Can you bring the slide where the results were? Yes, as you can see there is safety threshold, and we have mean log of the meat. As you can see there, less than 5, less than 2, less than 2, less than 2. If it is greater than 5 or than 2, it is a public health concern. So I can say, according to the result, this is a public health concern, and it must be corrected so as to protect the public, because the standards are there, and the threshold surface is not on the scale. So by interpretation, we need to change our policy so as to protect the community from this contamination of bacteria and the poor surface hygiene from the slaughter slabs. Also, the issue of flies. It is true there are many flies in most of the butchers and slaughter slab, but also it is true that some chemicals that are used to kill flies, it is not good for human health. Sometimes it can make contamination. We have advised some butchers owners to make sure that the cleanness is there, the fan is there so as to chase the flies. Also, to put the meat in the cold chain, in the refrigerator, in the fridge, so as to avoid the those meats that attract. If the flies come, it is something there that is attracting them. So if the meat is well packed in the refrigerator or in the fridge, I don't think if flies will come there, because they are looking for something, right? Mr. Afiabora?
Yes, it is right. But also coming to the issue of consumers, most of consumers need to see the meat so that they can buy.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Also, if there is the issue of contamination by flies, I think that can be corrected by proper cooking of the meat. That is why we need to focus on giving awareness on people to cook the meat well. Proper cooking also can avoid meat to be contaminated. Thank you.
Sorry, if I can have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Yeah. Something that maybe I want to hear is, can we use the presence or not presence of flies as an indicator for safety, that the perception that it is here? Is it correct, the perception?
Yep, it is correct. Because flies can act as the means of transportation of pathogenic bacteria, because they go to the bitter places, they come and then come to the butcher in the meat. That is contamination. So if the flies are not there, we can say this meat is somehow good. But if the owner of the butcher use chemicals that is not good for human health, it can cause chemical contamination to the meat, and it can lead to other issues also. So wisdom is needed there to balance and optimize these things. Thank you.
I also don't want to ask too many questions, but if no one else has one, I will. I'm interested in this topic of AMR, and if everyone else knows the answer to this, I'm sorry to ask an ignorant question, but can you talk a little bit about whether the antibiotics bioaccumulate? So when a person eats a lot of meat that has been treated with antibiotics, is there a risk of that accumulating in the human system, or is it generally not too much of a concern?
Of course, the issue of antimicrobial resistance, it happens when you constantly take antibiotic and underdose. If you are taking antibiotics or antimicrobial drugs, that is an underdose. You can be in the problem of antimicrobial resistance. So when you eat the meat that is contaminated with antimicrobial, with antibiotics, we take that drug into our body. It is absorbed in small amount. It is underdose. It is underdose. And something that is very bad, these people who make food for animals, for chicken maybe, they are putting some antibiotic there so as to avoid bacteria growth in the food. So when animal eat that, the animal also is getting the drug underdose, leading to the problem of antimicrobial resistance to them, also to us. So we can get antimicrobial, we can get that problem from eating that meat. Also, the animal can get that problem from eating the food that is containing that drug. Yes. Are you satisfied?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
And one thing just to share quickly that folks in the call might find interesting about antimicrobial resistance is that there's some emerging research about how this might be developing from caged fish farming in Lake Victoria in the north of Tanzania, where, like Elisha was saying, the fish feeds might be medicated with antimicrobials when they're dumped into the water. And obviously, like, fish aren't eating all of the food. it's also being dispersed into the water, and people, are bathing and drinking near this water too. It's a growing problem. So I'm going to put a link to a link in the chat to a paper about this, which you might find interesting.
Thank you.
Did he ask me a question?
I was just
sharing
sharing about the about AMR in fish farming.
Okay.
You might like the paper I put in the chat.
Okay. That's good. Thank you very much.
And we have time for a couple more questions if anyone else wants to ask them. I have a ton of questions that I could ask, but I'll try to let some other people just in case they have any.
I can ask a question. So going back to your recommendations, and hi again, it's great to see you, Elisha. In your recommendations, there were some more systemic, high-level changes within the policymakers and those managing the different slaughterhouses. So have you been conducting any more like basic educational efforts to disseminate their results to factory workers and other meat handlers?
Sorry, come again and speak slowly. I can't catch your words properly.
Sorry about that. So I'm just wondering, are you conducting any educational efforts at the factory level? So educating the factory workers and other meat handlers, besides your more high level recommendations?
Yeah. Of course, we have done some outreach, school visit. We are teaching students on how to make proper meat. Also, awareness about hygiene practices. Also, the issue of antimicrobial resistance to them. Also, church visits at Sunday. We go there and ask for permission from the church leaders to talk with the congregation. Maybe if they have prepared something, we can use that platform to teach the audience about the effect of contaminated meat and the importance of hygiene as generally. So we have that programs, church visit, school visit, and whenever we go to the meat inspection process, we tell them, but not at that large because we are too few.
Mm.
Yes. Are you satisfied?
Yes, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Daniel, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question as well.
Yes, thank you. I want to ask a follow-up question. I'm Daniel Okello from Uganda, and the practices in Tanzania, I think, are very much similar to what is in Uganda. But my question as a follow-up is that is the sensitization also going back to the producers of the livestock? Because sometimes these antimicrobes come in meat because the farmer does not observe the withdrawal period. If you treat livestock, for instance, for some conditions, there is a minimum for all the drugs. There's a minimum period before which that animal should not be slaughtered. And so that means that the awareness has to go also back to the farmers along the value chain, so that they are also aware that if I am selling a cow or a cattle for slaughter, it should not be one that still has some drugs in them. Thank you.
Yeah. Of course, that is true. The farmers don't understand the issue of withdrawal period. and that may be due to lack of knowledge about that, lack of knowledge to the farmers. We are returning back to that point of awareness to the community about the withdrawal period, about the effect of using antimicrobial or antibiotic that may affect animal products and byproducts. So this issue of farmers not understanding this, some of them are taking advantage of it, especially this butcher's owner and the slaughter men. They know everything, but if you go there, they can tell you that this must be sold to other people, not you, because it contains some drugs. So the problem is there. Some know, some don't know. So for those who don't know, I can't judge them because it's the lack of their knowledge. That is why I still insist on making more awareness and promote more education to the community. And I argue the government to send, if someone is known to do that, he or she should be sent to the legal procedure so as to be the lesson to other people in the community. Are you satisfied, sir?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that response.
Thank you.
We only have 2 minutes left, but Daniel, if you really quickly are able, would you mind sharing a little bit about your perspective in Uganda and whether you have any kind of systematic testing of meat, or if there's a policy of a withdrawal period which farmers are meant to observe, and whether you know if that's typically observed?
Yeah, thank you. In Uganda, like I said, the practices may not be so different from Tanzania, but we have the abattoirs. Usually there is a district veterinary or a veterinary officer that is supposed to inspect the meat at slaughter. But the focus is largely on these parasites, those that you can easily observe, not on antimicrobial residues and so on. And so you find that even if the residues are there, it still reaches the market because the meat inspector is only coming to see whether there are traces of liver fluke, traces of those other diseases which can easily be identified. But there are also two ways. There is also the informal market, which lacks inspection. Like now, people are preparing for Christmas, but in the rural areas, you find people slaughtering animals at home with no inspector, nothing. So those ones are left at the mercy of God, if I may say. But the challenge is there because I remember a study in Uganda on the pig value chain that found that there were farmers who were feeding pigs with these antiretroviral drugs meant for HIV patients. And so they would include it in the feeds with the mentality that it would help fatten those pigs and then it will reach market weight very fast. And so all those are things which are happening in the market. As for antimicrobial resistance, there is no policy on withdrawal period. It is left to the farmer to decide when to sell and when not to sell. Because if he needs money, he would sell it. And sometimes they sell, for instance, a cow that is being milked and maybe being treated, being milked. So even the milk itself may also be contaminated because the animal is being treated, the milk is. So the challenge is there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your perspective. It's interesting to hear similarities and maybe some differences as well between Uganda and Tanzania. And thank you, Elisha, so much for sharing today. It was a really interesting presentation, and I definitely learned a lot. And thank you everyone on the call for bearing with us in our technical difficulties in the beginning and my challenges in sharing this slideshow. I will just share again in the chat really quickly the link to the website and today's event page, where you can find the recording of this event. And if anyone wants to get in touch at any point ever, you can email us at researchcommunities@tufts.edu as well. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you hopefully at the next event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elisha.